Compared to other cities in China, it's very competitive to get funding from the government to do startup. But in Hong Kong, we still have opportunities. But the thing is, the government gives you a hope when you get into start your business, quite frustrated because.
Hi everybody, welcome to a new episode of Smart Talk. I'm Stefano. Please, before starting our show, remember to subscribe to our channel. Today, I'm very honored to have with me two guests. They are Mr. Witman Hung.
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Witman Hung. I have spent about 34 years in the IT industry. First started as a programmer, but then various large corporations as management. I had two startups, and now I'm kind of like advocacy person.
And Mr. Wong?
Hello guys, I'm Kachin. The CEO and the co-founder of a biotech startup, SPES Tech. So we are specialized in developing innovative life science solutions.
The Hong Kong government has been working very hard on promoting health code and travel bubble issues in order to facilitate people's cross-border traveling in the COVID-19 area. How do you assess its feasibility under the current situation, and what are the government concerns?
I think the first thing is it has to be, the health code has to be mutually recognized, and
okay.
I don't think they're doing that yet. So it's kind of like having two systems, because the mainland part of the health code actually covers everything. They kind of trace you everywhere you go, whereas in Hong Kong it's just about one test you had. So fundamentally there's some difference. But I think what's more important is that we need to, clear our cases.
Okay.
I mean, it doesn't matter if you have code, but if you're still having like half a dozen or a dozen cases every day, our counterparts across the border, they are afraid, and legitimately so. So I think that will be the main concern.
Okay.
I feel like because the health code in Hong Kong is voluntary, so it's not compulsory, so it's not valuable to trace back the cases. So I agree on Witman's point that we should focus on control the local situations.
Yeah, because I heard that one of the travel bubble is with Singapore.
Yes.
And probably I heard yesterday that maybe they may start on the 22nd. But when it will be active, will you try the travel bubble in Singapore?
I won't. Apparently there will be need if you're business travelers.
Yeah.
They have some limitation as well. They said a maximum 5 cases without trace, so meaning not without cause.
Okay.
So if you exceed that, they will stop the thing for 2 weeks.
Okay.
I can understand why they do that, but I think the most important thing is really to clear the cases.
Yes. Compared to mainland China and other places around the world, Hong Kong is somehow lagging behind high-tech industry, such as mobile payment. In your opinion, what has caused that? How should Hong Kong improve in this?
Yeah, there are several reasons. Number one is we are a very mature, community and business environment. We used to be quite advanced in technology. If you remember, we had Octopus, right? We had we were the first in Asia to have the real-time gross settlement between the banks. We were the first to introduce electronic ID cards, one of the first in the world. We were the first to launch e-government services in the early 2000 years. But then we kind of stay there, because once you have a system there, I mean, I used to be a supplier to the Hong Kong government. So I know when you put a system in, and they kind of expect it to run for at least 7 years. That's how we as vendors have to commit.
Okay.
Now, in IT, what happens in 7 years? In 7 years, it's probably like 5 generations of technology changes. So, but then the government procurement, they can't say, oh, let's scrap the old system and change. So that's one side. The other side is the laws and regulations. We Hong Kong people are very proud to be a rule of law. I mean, we were first to introduce actually electronic transaction ordinance also in 2000, and then the thing is, in some of these new areas, there are no laws or regulation covering. Whereas in Hong Kong, what we say is, oh, let's wait, let's draft the law, let's think about all the risks and then decide. We are so used to have proven systems. Whereas if you go across the border, when Alipay was first launched, there was no law. They were in a gray area. Same with Tencent, same with a lot of other things. Because the mainland China, they were going through a series of reform and open up. They were used to this kind of changes. They did not have to go through the iterations. They can jump. For example, during the fixed line era, mainland China is much more lagging behind than Hong Kong. But then they just come directly into mobile, right?
Yeah.
And then they directly into, now into 5G. So whereas we still have the old legacy and we have to wait to sunset, to migration. There's so many things. How to solve that? There's one more thing. That's the mindset of people. In Hong Kong, we kind of, maybe we're just rich and comfortable. We're not used to trying out new things. Whereas in mainland China, they try out, they make mistake, they try again. After a while, as we in technology and innovation, we know there's no guarantee for success in the first place. But we know if we try enough times, maybe one day we'll be successful. Whereas in Hong Kong, people kind of say, can you guarantee success? No, no one can guarantee.
Yeah, right.
Mobile payment, I'm not worried. we're here already. Now you have PayMe, you have TNG, you have a lot of others. It's not that hard to catch up, okay? Hong Kong has the money, the people, the only problem is the willingness, okay? So in the future, I think the main need is we need to change our mindset, be more open.
I feel like Hong Kong is too well structured that the government have to consider all stakeholders before making decisions. So they tend to be less open-minded. On the other side, it's like maybe Hong Kong people are more concerned about data privacy. It's hard for the government have the regulations and rules to embrace this innovative technology.
And in terms of promoting science, technology development and innovation, how should Hong Kong government do better?
First thing is to be open. As I said, I used to be a vendor to the government. Almost on every single government tender that is set, proven system haven't been applied in a similar environment before. So by definition, it's not innovation, right? It has to be proven and applied in a similar environment before. And that is really bad for the local innovation people, because if I'm a startup in Hong Kong, let's say I do a system for the custom excise department. Now, for it to be proven, I have to apply it to one custom department somewhere in the world. Now, if the Hong Kong government is not using it, I will have a very hard time persuading some other government to use it. The government actually did a good job. They had a lot of support funding. Okay, the ITC, Innovation Technology Commission, always give out grants to companies. When they approve the funding, they had this mindset that you have to guarantee success. So what happens is then you have a lot of these cases is applied by universities or like the Hong Kong Productivity Council. It's a guaranteed success, but there's no relevance, right? You have a successful product, but there's no market, there's no, people are not using it. I think they need to change the mindset and say, okay, technology involves risk, but the return on success is much higher. So we're willing to try out. Another thing that is important is we have very good fundamental research. We have good universities, we have good talent. Our problem is we do not have enough industries. Okay, maybe we have banking and finance and trade, but if you move towards, for example, manufacturing, okay, products, it's very hard. Whereas just across the border, there's many, many industries. So I think what we need to do is we need to encourage more collaboration between the industries in the Pearl River Delta and the Hong Kong institutions like universities and the applied research centers.
I share the same experience because our startup SPES Tech are actually the incubator of the Hong Kong Science Park. Okay. So we do obtain the funding from the ITF. Most of the top management, they tends to not have startup experience, maybe. That's why it's hard for them to manage startup in this way. We are quite lucky to get funding from the government. Compared to other cities in China, it's very competitive to get funding from the government to do startup. But in Hong Kong, we still have opportunities. But the thing is, the government gives you a hope. When you get into start your business, quite frustrated because it takes like 6 months to get the money reimbursed. And also in Hong Kong, it's very hard to raise money for very early stage startup.
The issue, of course, with the ITC is that the rigidity is really huge. Because I knew of one case, this is like 20 years ago, there was a company in Science Park that the guy was put in jail.
Wow. I see.
Because he wrongly proportioned some of the monies. Because the money you spend on coffee can't be spent on sugar, right? So if you save some money on coffee and try to buy sugar, you actually have committed a crime. So that is really something we need to be a little bit more flexible. In mainland China, it's very different. It's very competitive when you fight for the money, but once you get the money, they let you do whatever you want with it.
Some people are reluctant to embrace new technology because of privacy concerns. How could tech companies overcome these deep-rooted barriers in people's mindset?
It's a legitimate worry. Okay, privacy is important. There are two things. Well, number one is your privacy is being infringed one way or the other. I mean, remember, I think it was 2013, I was in Estonia talking with the Estonian government and say, well, what about privacy? And the minister answered my question. He said, Mr. Hung, let me tell you, Google knows more about you than any government in the world. If I go to Amazon and I, surf around, look around, my search record become a data, right? Even though I didn't do any transaction. Now, do I own that data? Or does Amazon own the data?
Should be Amazon.
No.
No.
I think the tendency now in China, as well, certainly in Shenzhen and also in Europe as well, is that I own the data. By going into the system, I have licensed them to use the data, but only for themselves. Now, if Amazon sell my data to Facebook, they need to get my consent. Not only do they need my consent, they have to explicitly ask my consent. I mean, I think that is the most important thing is right now because data become assets. I mean, you can even trade data these days. So it is very important that we define those rules. And today, these rules are not fully defined. But on the other hand, starting from day one on the internet, privacy is a compromise. Okay, I sacrifice some of my privacy in return for convenience, in return for value. Okay, but as long as I acknowledge that, as long as I have granted consent, it should be okay. In our industry, there's actually, technology and way to handle. Let's say we have all our data, but at the end, it will just identify me as a male of Chinese origin, age between 30 to 60, something like that, maybe weights between 100 and 200 pounds. So once it's that, then it cannot be linked back to me. But then that data is still important. For example, in the biotech, you don't need to know who, but you need to know what kind of persons, male or female, what kind of age range, And now there are ways of doing that. In China, there's actually specialized companies that does this kind of, cleaning up data. So I think in Hong Kong and other places, we need to introduce this kind of thinking as well.
Yep. I think first of all, the technology can tackle people's pain points. I think that's the most important thing instead of data ownership. Because once the technology can change your behavior, people will be more acceptable to new technology. But I do believe the authority should have some guidelines on the data access to increase, general public's confidence on accepting new technology.
And do you want to ask any tips about the startup world since he has a lot of experience?
Of course. First of all, do you have any philosophy or